You're listening to the StudioPTBO podcast, where we talk all things marketing to help you build and grow your business online. Welcome to the latest episode.
And welcome to the StudioPTBO podcast. We are back, and we're back at it again with another guest. Thank you so much for tuning in another episode of the StudioPTBO podcast. If you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you're listening to us, I want to say thank you. We are really on a mission to help passionate and energetic entrepreneurs with marketing and mindset knowledge, help them build, grow, and scale their business online. Neil Morden, my co-host, my confidant. How you doing, man?
Good, Cody May. How are you?
I can't complain. I would be happier if I was in Orange County, California. Yes. You know that.
As our guest, Dave Ferrara is today from California, and you're quite right. I want their wine, and Dave was showing us some wine that he has in the green room prior to the show, and it looks spectacular. It'd be perfect for a Friday night if I can fly down there by tonight and sip that with you, Dave. But welcome to the show, Dave.
Thanks for having me. We're gonna have a lot of fun.
Yeah,
we have a ton of fun.
So Dave is an entrepreneur, engineer, inventor, advisor, speaker, and author. He has a book coming out. There's nothing this guy doesn't do. And he grew up playing ice hockey. So he basically is Canadian, right, Cody?
Well, pretty much. I don't play ice hockey, so I guess I'm not Canadian.
Actually, I grew up in Peterborough. Home of the Peterborough Petes, a storied OHL franchise, and didn't play hockey. But Dave Ferrara did grow up in Massachusetts and played some ice hockey in his day, right, Dave?
I did. Mites through college. I sure did all that.
Were you any good?
Love it.
I wasn't going pro. I was a grinder. I was one of those guys. I was the guy that got into the corner and had lots of assists, but I didn't have that sniper's edge shot. But hey,
Ty-Domi.
Here I am.
You were the Ty-Domi. Ty-Domi of Massachusetts.
Yeah, Dave would have been the enforcer for sure.
I wasn't much of a fighter either, but
Oh, okay.
You're a lover. But so Dave is a little more backstory on. I'm general partner at Quantum Fun OC, and that's again based out of Orange County. And that studio designs and develops and commercializes products in the medical field. And Dave, how did you get started in this field of engineering and design and entrepreneurship? Did this start as a kid or college? Take us through.
It started in college. It's late 80s, before cell phones. My father had called me in my apartment in Lowell, Massachusetts. Happened to answer the phone that day, and my Pepe just had an ischemic stroke. It was after a routine surgery he had called the carotid endarterectomy. And that's routine, believe it or not. And plaque from his carotid artery traveled up and occluded his right middle cerebral artery. And I didn't really know what any of that meant back then, but I traveled home, met the neurologist who informed me that there's really nothing they could do for my grandfather except keep him somewhat comfortable until he died. So we knew he was going to die, didn't know when. It happened to be the week of my sister's wedding, so we were all getting ready for a pre-rehearsal dinner, and the wedding's going to be, actually in a few days. So he could speak. The right middle cerebral artery was occluded. That really controls thought process, reasoning, but he was entirely confused. And the physician understood I was studying engineering, after speaking to my father probably, and said, hey, healthcare may be an area you could go into, because right now there's nothing I can utilize to help your grandfather. We just got to keep him comfortable. So that led me into interning at a catheter company, which was in Billerica, Mass, called USCI. And they had just developed what was called angioplasty catheters. And angioplasty catheters were catheters that had balloons on the end, and you could put them through an artery that had an occlusion, not the brain, but through the heart. And, you would actually inflate the balloon to open the artery, allowing blood to flow. Before that, the patient needed surgery. It was a procedure called CABG, coronary artery bypass grafting, where they would take veins from your leg and suture them across the occlusion that's in the heart. So in the 1980s, catheter-based technology, or what's called minimally invasive therapies, were being developed, primarily in the heart initially. after I graduated, there wasn't a job for me there. I ended up taking a job at a company in Tempe, Arizona called Impra. And I worked on a catheter there. It was a subclavian dialysis catheter. It was a catheter with 2 holes in it. And it went into your subclavian artery, which is in your shoulders on both sides. And you could do a blood transfusion through that.
Wow.
I worked there for about a year. I was recruited to go back to Boston to work for a company that just went public called Boston Scientific Corporation. And I began working on teams that made other types of catheters. And it was there that I'd met this older Chinese scientist that I'd have coffee with him, and I couldn't understand half of what he was saying sometimes. But he would say, hey, stroke therapy is the future. So if you're going to stay in this radiology field, then you should get involved with a company or discover a technology that can be used to treat stroke. And at the time, he explained to me what a hemorrhagic stroke was, which is usually caused from an aneurysm bleeding, or an ischemic stroke, which is an occlusion of an artery, which is what my grandfather had. So about 5 years later, I received a phone call from a recruiter where a business guy and a doctor were looking for an engineer to help them develop a product that would be deploying what's called embolization coils into brain aneurysms that would either prevent a hemorrhage or stop a hemorrhage. So I got into stroke really in 1997 by being a co-founder of a company called Micros, and we were making embolization coils to treat brain aneurysms. So that 8-year span from my grandfather having a stroke and dying to me getting involved in healthcare and catheters led me to this.
So really that life-changing moment with your grandfather, like,
yeah, absolutely.
It's these moments in life, Cody?
Yeah,
We talk about a lot.
It's totally the moments.
And it's interesting. I was interviewing for another company, which you guys have probably heard of this company. There was a car company called Saturn, and it was going to be the first plastic car. And I flew to Troy, Michigan for a job interview in January of all times of the year. And I was offered the job as an intern. And I was like, I live in Massachusetts. It's cold there. It was colder in Michigan. I turned that job down. And probably it's like Canada, right?
Yeah.
And that company's out of business now, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't make Saturns anymore. So I think choosing a career in healthcare was the right decision.
So, at what point did you decide that, obviously you became a co-founder of a company? When did entrepreneurship come into this? We've chatted with so many entrepreneurs across North America. What made you want to kind of co-found companies? And again, doing some research, medical startups, ideas to exit. I'm just curious kind of where that came from. Obviously there was that original ideology, I guess, of, really wanting to help people, specifically around that key moment. But what inspired the entrepreneurial journey?
Working with physicians at Micros was a lot of fun. So hearing the problems that they had during procedures, and really back then in the 90s, there weren't many products out there that physicians had to treat aneurysms or even treat the heart or other parts of the body. So I would say the 1990s and 2000s, a lot of activity was occurring, but the key to being successful there was to work closely with the people who had the problem, and those are the physicians. So getting a taste of where innovation occurs, understanding what the problem is and being involved in that lab or the angio suite. That was the beginning of it, because early on when I was, interning at that company, USCI, or when I was at Boston Scientific, I was never able to travel to see the physicians and be in the procedure and see how they did their work, or even identify or understand the problems that they had. It wasn't until Micros when I was traveling to Zurich, Switzerland. I was in Paris, France. I was in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I was in Buffalo, New York, working side by side with physicians and seeing the problems, the trouble, the pain that they went through, and hearing them say, "Hey, if you could only make me this," I'm like, "Wow, I can be part of that solution. Wow, this is going to be fun." So that's when I got it. My father worked at a tool and die shop when I was, I used to mow the lawn there as a 12, 13-year-old. Yeah, and he was part of a small business, but I really didn't get the bug until I was in the thick of it. When I was in there the angio suite knee deep with the physicians who was having the problem. I was like, well, I can be part of the solution. That's when I caught on.
So what's the North Star for you then? Like, what's the, like as an entrepreneur, constantly wanting to, like, I look at entrepreneurs as people that really go into the future and pull what's possible into the now. What is the North Star in regards to innovation? Like, especially in the medical industry, it being such an important element towards life, because health is wealth, health is life. What is your North Star?
Because I should add, sorry, Dave has 75 patents right now for medical devices, and I went in a couple of those, Dave.
I wish.
I didn't do it alone.
Yeah,
I work with teams, like playing ice hockey. I was the guy that fed the puck, right? I work with teams.
Yeah,
it's funny to talk about North Star, because I think my North Star has changed over the decades. And I have a life coach that I'm working with now, and we just went through this exercise. My North Star today is really bringing joy to my team members, physicians I work with, through either developing medical devices or coaching and mentoring, the young engineers who are on my team. So yeah, my North Star is, if I can bring joy in providing a product or service to someone, then that's what's going to keep me moving forward.
And where did that come from? Because, I've read that you are on a lot of boards and you give time for free. You volunteer. You have a really philanthropic side to you. Has that always been a part of you, or did you learn that over the years? And what does that look like in terms of karma for you?
Yeah, it was something that I read about. I can remember, it's probably before I started Mindframe. It's probably 2005 or so. I had read a book called The Art of the Start. It was written by Guy Kawasaki, and I was able to see him present that, or he actually gave a talk one day in San Jose, and a part of the book, it was towards the end of the book, and he was discussing the art of being a mensch, which is a Jewish term for a person that just gives. And I was like, well, if you don't have much to give, well, we have our time, we have our knowledge, we have our experiences. And it could be, just being a teacher. It isn't always writing a check or, that. It's actually harder to give your time and energy and your knowledge. So, but as you give, it comes back. And you don't understand how much it comes back until you start to give and give more and get involved in foundations and actual boards. And my network, my world is bigger than I could have ever imagined by getting involved with foundation. I mean, I'm the 2020 chair for the Orange County Heart and Stroke Gala, which is virtual. It's October 29th. But the people that are involved in my circle of trust now, I would never imagine I'd have this quality of people around me, but it's because of the giving, and that's my North Star.
I absolutely love that, because we've chatted with a lot of entrepreneurs, and Neil and I have chatted a lot about this, about your network being equal to your net worth, and things like the more hands you shake, the more money you make. We had Bradley at our podcast a little while ago. He chatted about that. It's so many different key principles that we're learning from entrepreneurs like yourself, that really trying to get information from people that have it, the people that need it. So I'm really curious when it comes to, like talking specifically entrepreneurship. Like, I think the stat is only 4% of entrepreneurs will ever reach, $1 million in revenue. Obviously, that seems to be a common goal that a lot of entrepreneurs are reaching. I'm curious to know, because you've never had anyone on in the medical industry, what key principles have you seen specifically building, working in the medical industry, building, innovation, doing working with startups, exiting, that had essentially were key principles in order to actually build a business or build an organization or move a team forward? I would be curious to kind of hear your insight on 3 tips or tactics that you have that, as you're doing these things, have become the catalyst for where you are today.
Well, you have to solve a problem. There has to be a problem. And I think I talked about this earlier. If you create solutions and then you're looking for a problem, it's just the wrong approach. So you have to solve a problem. and you can't do it alone. You need a team, a very diverse team that understands what their seat is in that innovation process. And it has to be a market for the problem that you're solving. So, I'm very curious. The people I work with on my team are always curious and looking at, is there a better way to do something? Is there an easier way to do something? Is there a safer way to do something? And therein lies the problem that you can create a solution around. And then do you have the right people that can help you take that solution or that idea and really develop it, make it something tangible, reduce it to practice? And then is there a market? Are there people that really see the problem you have that can help you grow it? And it's pretty simple. It's simple now that I'm older, but I think when I was younger, it had to be something that no one ever saw before, and
exactly,
new materials that came from Mars, right?
Yeah, people tend to overthink that, don't they, a lot, Dave? And Cody and I talk about this a lot, how you have to find pain points for clients, and the consumer, and you need to solve a problem for them fundamentally. I want to come back to what you talked about. You talk a lot about team and leadership and collaboration. What does that look like for you on your team at Quantum Fund OC? Do you have a lot of brainstorms together, and you have to have sort of a hierarchy, if you will, or someone does this, you look after more business development, sales, other team, you have designers. So what does your team look like, and have you had continuity and good retention in that regard over the years?
Yeah, well, the team I'm working with now, I've been with them since 2007. So that was the team that we put together at Mindframe that developed the ischemic stroke device that could have been used to help my grandfather in 1989. The leaders at Quantum, it's Bill Colon, myself, and then we have an executive advisor, Matt Hayden. All the radiology development I've been involved with is from the neck up. Everything Bill's done is from the neck down. And Bill and I do really function as business development leaders. We know physicians that we work with for decades that come to us with lots of problems. And Matt's kind of our advisor on, say, the fundraising side. He's well connected with lots of family offices around the country. But the team at the Venture Studio that I work well with, it's a footprint that that we've owned now for several years. It's a contract manufacturing company where we have a head of engineering that when Bill and I understand a problem a physician has and we begin to think of a solution, we will go to our head of engineering and explain what the problem is, what the potential solution will be. Randall and his team, they design and engineer what the solution looks like. We have another head, Dawson, who's the head of manufacturing. He can take that engineered solution and scale it and manufacture it in our clean room. Then we have Charles, who's the head of regulatory and quality. He's the one that can get it approved through the FDA, can get it through the CE marking process, can get it approved in say China and Japan. So we all have a seat, and we all stay in our lane. I'd say professionally. Where if Bill and I are out there getting the ideas, working with the customers, Randall's doing the engineering, Dawson's doing the manufacturing, Charles is doing the regulatory approvals, and we're all experts in that area. We really function quite well. And we're all equal partners. So it isn't as if, I'm the old guy, I make all the money, I have all the equity. We're all equal partners. We all have if I identify a great problem, but it can't be engineered or get approved, well, then how good is the problem? And I always say ideas are free. You get rewarded for the execution you make. And the execution is shared through so many different people. So that is how our culture is created, and actually how it actually grows. But it's all equal partnership. We all have an important role to play, and if we succeed, we all get rewarded equally.
I'm really curious because, we're talking about team building, and a lot of entrepreneurs, I've chatted with struggle with finding the right people. So I'm really curious, you're dealing in a world that is life or death, medical, products. So I'm really curious to know, how do you find how do you seek out the right people? You chat a little bit about, 2007. These people have been with you for a while, but like when you're trying to bring somebody else on the team, like are there key things that you do or you look for in a person as you bring them onto your team, you bring them into your culture? And if so, what does that look like for you?
So 2007, I was 40. Okay. So I think it took me that long from, say, graduation in college in 1991 to 2007 to really understand what I was good at. It helped me understand kind of what I know and don't know. And then if you can get to that point, then you can begin to put a team around you. And it took me that long. I mean, the first company I co-founded in 97, I was fired from that company 2 years later. The CEO and I didn't really get along well. I won't go into that. And actually, part of that's in the book. But I was young. I thought I could do everything, and I couldn't. Right. And then I joined a company in 1999 called Microvention. That's what brought me to Orange County, and that was a team of rock stars that more or less was built kind of how I explained before. We had a head of engineering, a head of R&D, we had a head of quality and regulatory, we had a head of sales. And these, this executive team had already come from several successes, and they knew how to work well together. And that company culminated in an acquisition in 2006 by a Japanese company for $250 million.
Wow.
So I took that experience, and when I left in 2007 to co-found Mindframe, I realized, okay, you just all have to know what you're good at and know where you're weak and build that around you. And that's how we built the team at Mindframe. We brought in Randall, the head of engineering. We brought in Charles, the head of quality and regulatory. The co-founders of Mindframe had already had a good team in place too. We had a head of R&D. We had a head of operations. George, who was the co-founding CEO, was the guy that knew how to raise all the money. So I saw how that team was put together. I complemented it with a few other key people, Randall and Charles, and that ended in an acquisition in 2012 to Covidian for $75 million. But it was about the team. So then when I left the Forum Blockade, I brought most of those people with me, and I realized, okay, if I stay doing what I'm really good at, working with physicians, and I bring those ideas back, and I kind of distribute the tasks around the team and what they do well, then we should succeed again. And we did. We ended up having an acquisition in 2016 for $42 million. So it was really knowing what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, what I like to do, what I don't like to do. Stay in my lane.
And building that team, you had great chemistry that you built over the years. And again, it's like a sports team. You can't necessarily just take the best athletes and sign them for hundreds of millions of dollars and expect them to win a title. In the case of, say, the Los Angeles Clippers, like it doesn't work that way. It's chemistry, and it takes time to build the right team and the right balance. I want to ask you, Dave, about, in terms of, you're saying you used to, like when we're young, we're always wanting to really reinvent the wheel. And we feel like we have to start from scratch with a new idea that nothing's ever been done before. And you sort of touch on this in your new book, like you talk about like making big ideas happen, and sort of what are the hurdles you think that some entrepreneurs and innovators encounter when they're trying to bring their big, huge idea to market? Do you think they get overwhelmed and paralyzed and don't even know where to start? Or what's the framework you sort of start to cover about that in your book that's coming out soon?
I've had this discussion with several venture capitalists over the years that I would love to peek into what their graveyard looks like. Where are the failures where they made investments, and why did they fail? Most of the times they had poor intellectual property filed. So the idea that they had wasn't even protected. So they might have got to market, but then someone copied what they had right away. Really designing and developing something that is easy and simple to use. Because they could be in development and then they missed their milestones because it was harder than they had anticipated. Or they met with the FDA and the FDA said, "Oh, you have to do a trial now," and that's another $5 to $7 million. It takes years. So So in the book, I do kind of cover a step-by-step process of when you hear about the problem, doing your research through the U.S. patent website. Has something like this ever been done before? Can you get patent protection? Because if you don't have patent protection, anybody can copy it. And that's what got Mindframe acquired by Covidien for $75 million. Was we were the ones who had the patent. Yeah. And Covidien actually beat us to market, but we had the patent. When the patent issued, they knew they were going to get sued. So they just acquired the company for $75 million cash. And then designing and developing the product, I mean, it has to be something that is straightforward and also easy for the visions, the doctors to use. If it's a complicated procedure, something's going to go wrong. You're going to injure the patient. So it's got to be something that's straightforward, easy enough to do, saves time, it's safer. And I walk through that, and then it's forming the team to design, develop the product, forming the team that can actually get it approved, forming the team that can commercialize it. Then also along that way is what type of corporation do you want to form? Do you want to form a C corp, an LLC? Do you want to form an S corp? And there's pros and cons to each one of those. Raising money. This is a mistake a lot of entrepreneurs make, is they don't want to put in their own capital contribution. So if you're not willing to invest your own money into your own solution, why would anybody want to put money into it? So you have to do your initial capital contribution. It could be $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 to file the patents, to build the prototypes, to actually reduce risk. Then you can go out there and raise money, and you could be raising money through angel networks, through VCs, through strategics, through family offices. And then once you do commercialize, you're not doing a full-blown launch right away. You want to do what's called a limited market release. Select 10 or 15 customers and have them use the product under a controlled scenario. Identify how they use it. Is it working? Or some people it's easy to use, some people it isn't. You actually may have to have a different training program. So all of these things are things I've learned through the decades I've been working in the field, and there are mistakes that I've made from even working back at Boston Scientific and Micros and Microvention. Like, it's not a sprint. It's really a journey getting to the marketplace. And you have to have a team of not just engineers, but physicians and supporters and attorneys. So those are things that I walk through the book, and I explain the mistakes I made and why I do things differently now versus then.
Yeah, and I love, there's so much in there that with for entrepreneurship, something that I've heard somebody recently say is like, complexity creates deficits, simplicity scales. And I love how you mentioned that it's, creating something that's easy to use is something that is super important. I think really in any market you go into. I really want to close out with, more of a question on mindset. We have a Facebook community with a bunch of entrepreneurs and business owners called Marketing Mindset and Business Secrets Community. And this is something that we've been chatting a lot about, me and Neil, over the last little while. You mentioned having a life coach, and mentioned earlier on, and having somebody that can kind of just help steer you to gain radical clarity on what it is you want. I'm curious to know your insight on what it means to have a mindset that actually pushes you into the future, and a mindset that actually gives you the fortitude that you need in order to create the businesses, in order to exit, in order to do these startups, in order to actually create innovation. What does mindset mean to you?
So I began learning this probably 5 or 6 years ago, and as you get older, you get wiser, and you meet people, and they make things really simple for you. And there was a concept that I learned, I can say 5, 6, 7 years. It's called be, do, have. You first have to be the person you are. Be comfortable with who you are. And if you can be that person, then you're going to do the things that you're capable of doing. And maybe it's great things. And then once you start to do things, then you're going to have all the things that you need or want. So, and it could be anything. It could be as crazy as, hey, I just want to be wealthy. So you go off and you get a loan and buy a Lamborghini. It's probably stupid. I wouldn't do that. But that doesn't make you become the person you want to become. and then you don't do the thing. So you got to break it down incredibly simply. Be that person. And yeah, I'm an athlete. I'm a father. I'm a partner. You know, I got to be comfortable just being me. And that's going to attract a network of people around you or get you to become involved in your community. And my community isn't just my medical device community. It's my neighborhood in Orange County. It's the societies I'm involved with AYSO, coaching my kids. It's my medical society. So I have to be that person first. And if you can be, you'll do and you'll have. So it's more complicated than a 3-minute discussion, but I didn't learn this till I was probably in my mid 40s. And that's how I look at it. That's why
I've never heard that.
is bringing joy.
Yeah.
You know?
I've never heard that before. Be, do, have. I'm going to get a patent on that before Dave.
Go for it.
Yeah.
I'll pay you a royalty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Dave, you know, I really appreciate your time today. Just so much insight. I'm super excited to check out your book when it comes out. If somebody were to want to reach you, learn more about what you're doing, learn more about your book that, you know, eventually is going to come out, where is the best place that we can send them to?
I think right now it's LinkedIn. So I am on LinkedIn. And then Quantum Fund, we have a website. It's quantumfundoc.com. And I'm going through a whole new rebranding of myself right now. I'll be on Instagram and so forth, but it's easy to find me on LinkedIn or the Quantum Fund OC website.
Awesome. Yeah, so much insight, guys. Thank you so much, Dave. Really do appreciate your time today. And thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the StudioPTBO podcast. Like I mentioned at the top of the hour, we are really on a mission to help passionate and energetic entrepreneurs with marketing and mindset knowledge to help them build, grow, and scale their business online. Hope you got a ton of value out today. Look forward to chatting with you soon. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the StudioPTBO podcast. We will see you soon.